Ladies and gentlemen, it is finally time to jump into the deep end. And the best way to learn animating, take this from me, is to literally throw yourself into an animation you don't know how to make and just try to make it. Genuinely, I promise you that is how I learned pretty much everything in After Effects. Just jump into things you don't know how to make, try to figure it out, give it a try, fail a few times, and then just find out how you can actually do it. And today, we're just doing a small version of that. I'll be guiding you guys by the hand, and we're going to be doing something that's a bit more complex. Not only are we going to be doing movement animations, we're also going to be combining different animations together to get a very cool final result. We're going to be combining 3 animations. The plan is I want to create first of all, a ball. And the ball is going to scale in it's going to like pop into frame from a certain place. Then it's going to just kind of move all over the place like so, right? And then it's going to scale back out. Once it disappears, there's going to be a square that pops into the middle of the screen. And the square is going to be like a slingshot. It's going to move back and then it's going to fly off the screen in a certain direction. And then finally, we're going to have a triangle that pops into frame and it's going to do a rotation. It's going to rotate back and then it's going to rotate forward. And as it's rotating forward, it's going to roll off the screen. And I'll be sure to teach you guys using all 3 of these animations, how we can combine different animations together to get specific results. And after that, once we are able to do this, we're going to take the big masterclass. The big masterclass is how we create a bouncing ball effect. And that is where we're going to be learning how to interpret velocity and how to bring that into animations with realism. And that's going to be a very, very cool one. We're going to be creating a very cool rectangle that's actually going to look like it's going fast, and also a ball that's going to look like it's both bouncing. And we're going to use that. We're going to basically use physics to do all of that. So this being said, let's dive into our movement animation. Okay. Inside of After Effects, real quick, just to make this animation a bit better, we're going to stylize things just a little bit more. I'm getting sick of this old, black background, so we're adding in a new solid, and we're just going to make a darkish gray background. I think that's pretty good. Okay, that's just a lot nicer than a black background. And then to add our shapes on top of it, let's start with a shape layer, and let's get started on the ball animation. So we're going to select the ellipse tool, hold down shift, and draw out a ball like this. I obviously hate this stroke, so we're going to delete it, and then for the fill, we're going to go with a relatively lighter gray. Like so, and that is looking pretty good. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started on things. First up, you want to make sure your anchor point's in the center whenever you're dealing with scale and stuff. So this is just a side note, like this has nothing to do with animating. Just click on A to bring up your anchor point and just make sure it's at the center of your ellipse, okay? Something like this will be pretty good. Another way you could do this is you could just align it to the center using your align function, but there's no need to do that. All right, so what do I want with the ellipse? I want it to pop into frame, so I want it to scale in, okay? I want this animation to go from 0 to 100, scale in. Let's go ahead and start by doing the pop in, and then we'll start doing the movement. So first up, we're going back to 0 seconds. Since I want it to start at 0, I'm going to start the scale at 0, like that. But I'm going to add a keyframe. So what does this say? This tells After Effects that at this moment, we're starting with our scale at 0. Nice and simple. Now let's move forward to around 1 second and scale it up to something like 100. So what do we have so far? We just basically started the animation with a scale of 0 and then move forward and have it pop into frame like this. Nice and simple. Let's start by making this one smooth. We're going to select it, head over to the speed graph. Now look, we can either use the speed or the value graph. Either one works. Since I want a more elastic kind of animation, I'm going to be using the value graph. So we're going to select both of these and we're going to click on F9. What this is going to do is it's going to smoothen it out, and you guys can see my entry. I can't really change much about it unless I move it forward slightly. So let's go ahead and do that. And I'm going to just start the entry really quick and end it slow, but also end it with a bit more of a pop up. So it's going to pop up and then scale back down. Okay, I think that's going to look really cool. So boom, we get this kind of cool pop in. I'm going to move this forward a bit more and then just increase like this spike over here, just to make it a bit more noticeable. So we have boom, scale in, and then scale back down. Nice and simple. So what do we have so far? We just have scale in and scale back down. All right, nice and simple. That being said, let's get started on the next part. The next part is I want to start this thing in the top left and I want to move it to the bottom right and then have it scale off of screen. So what do I do now? I'm going to click on P. When I click on P, I'm going to bring up my position. Okay, now this thing scales in. I want this thing to first of all start in the top left. So let's go ahead and move this like that to our top left like this. And let's add a keyframe. Now, this thing scales in and then we have a keyframe on the top left. I want to make sure I don't add my keyframe before it scales in because then my ball isn't even on screen. So once it scales in and appears on the screen, I add my keyframe for the first position in the top left. Now we're going to move forward. Let's move forward maybe a whole second. And then we're just going to move it to the bottom right. So we could just do this with our cursor, by the way. We can just move this to the bottom right. I prefer doing it with the values. You can hold down shift to move your values faster. So you can see without shift, I'm moving slow, and with shift, I can move so much faster. And the same thing with alt, by the way, it just moves so much less. So if you guys want a detailed movement, hold down alt. If you want a quick movement, hold down shift, okay? So I'm gonna hold down shift, move it to the right and to the bottom over here. So you guys can see my path is already nice and straight, okay? So what do we have? We have scale in, we have a robotic move to the bottom, and then we're going to have it scale out. Let's go and get started on the movement. So we could just select both of these like this, and we can either do this with speed graph or with value graph. Now, here, check this out. We're changing both X and Y value. So you have to remember a few things. So for that reason, I'm going to be using the speed graph because I don't want to overcomplicate it and I don't want to do this the complex way. Let's right click and click on edit speed graph, and we have our speed graph again. And you guys remember how to use this one. It's nice and simple. All we have to do is select it and click on F9. And then we're just going to have it start quick and then slow down. Okay, so we just zoom in. Let's just kind of move this back slider all the way back over to here. This way we have a spike in the beginning, and that way we have scale in and then start quick and then slow down like that. Okay, now this being said, what do we have so far? We can select our layer and click on U to see all of our keyframes. We have a keyframe for the scale. It pops in and then it smooths out, right? If you guys want to make this animation smoother, here's a quick tip, by the way. Don't start them robotically after each other. Don't have the scale finish and then start the position. You could start the position while it's still scaling in. So it scales in and starts moving. That's going to be so much smoother. That's a quick tip. This is something called overlapping animations. Overlapping animations can make them super, super smooth. And this is like the best thing you could do to basically make really smooth animations inside of After Effects, okay? So check that out. Scale in, move to the bottom, and then we're going to want it to scale out again. Now check this. If I start scaling out from here, it's going to go from this keyframe and start scaling out. So instead, what I have to do is I have to add another keyframe by clicking this button here, telling After Effects that at this moment, it is still this scale. But this is where we begin our scale out animation, and we're going to go 1 second forward and we're going to scale this down to 0. Now we're going to select this and go into our value graph. This is the speed graph. This is the value graph, and we're going to do the same exact effect. Okay, let's go ahead and zoom in on it. We're going to have it start with a jump. So it's going to scale out and then it's going to scale back down to 0. Now, due to the fact that we're scaling down to 0, there's no negative value that we could go to. So we're just going to keep that at 0. And there we go. So we have scale in, move to the bottom, and then scale out. Now, that being said, and once again, we don't want to start our animation right after the position. Unless you guys want a very robotic animation, we're going to overlap them a little bit. So check out what's happening. We have the scale in, and then it starts the position. And as the position is ending, it's scaling down. Nice and simple. Now, if you guys want to do this a more basic way and understand it, this is what it's going to look like this. So scale in, and then keyframe for position begins. Position moves to the bottom, keyframe for position ends, and then scale out begins. So you get this animation. Okay, and if you guys want to do it a smoother way, we can overlap them so that the position starts as the scale out and scale out starts as the end of the position. So we have scale in, position, scale out. Nice and simple. And this being said, we could basically cut our layer right here because we're basically done with it. All right, that makes it for our circle. Okay, nice and simple. By the way, if you guys want to take this animation to the next level, toggle switches and modes, turn on your motion blur and turn on motion blur for this layer. You're going to get some pretty cool motion blur as the movement happens, and it just looks really nice. Okay, let's go ahead and do this for another layer. The second part is we want a rectangle to scale into frame from the center of the screen, and we basically want it to slingshot back and then move off the screen. We already know how to make this. Let's go ahead and do it. Let's right click, add a new shape layer, okay? And I'm just going to cut it over here just to make sure it's nice. Or actually, I'm not going to cut it. I'm going to leave it as it is. I'm just going to move it forward. And then right around here, I'm going to draw out a rectangle, kind of like that, in the middle. We could use a rectangle. We're actually just going to use a square because it's going to be better. Let's once again make sure that the anchor point's in the center. We do this by clicking on the A and then just moving the anchor point until it's in the center like that. Now let's go ahead and play around with our rectangle. I don't like the way it looks. So let's go down to contents, rectangle, delete that stroke. And then for the fill, let's just use a light gray, just like we did with before. Awesome. All right, now let's go ahead and play around with a cool animation for this thing. The first thing I want to do is I don't want it to appear like that, cut into screen, like this. I want it to scale in. Okay, so I'm clicking on S for the scale, moving maybe 1 second forward or something like that, keyframing the current scale. So now I'm basically telling After Effects that at 1 second, it's at 100. And then I just move my playhead backwards and I start it at 0. That's the trick to making a very good scale animation. That's basically it. Like, you just move forward, you tell After Effects, okay, at this moment, this is the end of my animation. It ends at 100. And I move back and I set the start to 0. All right, let's select both of these, go to our speed graph. Now we're using the value graph, which we could totally use. Let's select both of these. Let's do F9, and then let's just have it start flat. We're going to have it start quick and then slow down. So I'm going to move this thing back. So it starts quick, you know, hops on tons of values and then slows down. And then we're also going to have it bump up a little bit like this. Nice and simple. Let's make sure we've got motion blur toggled. Nice and simple. Pop in like that. And then let's do our position animation. So for the position animation, all that we have to do is click on P to bring up the position. Keyframe the start position over here. Let's move 1 second forward and keyframe the end position over, let's do the top of the screen like that. Okay. So this means it's going to go from straight here to the end. So boom, and then moves to the top. Now you guys notice it's a very robotic movement. So let's bring this into the speed graph. And we're actually going to be doing this with the value graph. Since we're only changing the Y value, let's separate the dimensions. And I want it to slingshot down and then pop back up. So we're going to do this with the Y value. Since the Y value is starting over here at 500 and then moving down to minus 280, which is actually up on our screen, we could select this and we could click on F9 to smoothen it out. And we could just start it with a big bump like this and end it with a, you know, let's do a pretty fast ending. Okay, we're going to do a fast ending. So slow start and then fast ending. And we're going to also start it with a big bump like this. And this is what we end up with. There we go. So we have a scale in and then we have it bump down. Now I think this bump down is too slow. So I'm actually going to make the ending faster over here. Bam. There we go. That looks a lot better. And this being said, we have our scale in animation. Now, if we click on U and we basically check out the scale and the position, we can overlap them to make them smoother like that. So we have a scale in and then a pop down. Now I do think that entry is too fast. So let's go ahead and quickly fix this by moving this back a little bit more. There we go. I think that's a great idea. So we have a circle come in, move down, move off the screen, square comes in, scales off the screen, and then finally we've got our triangle, which is going to be the best part. I hope you guys are understanding how these keyframes are working. Make sure to follow along step by step because that's going to help you guys wrap your head around it. We're going to right click and we're going to add in a new shape layer. Let's move that shape layer all the way back. Let's go ahead and add in a polygon tool right at the center of the screen. Let's go down to the points, set it to 3. Let's go down to the stroke, delete it, fill, set it to a light gray. All right, now what we want with this triangle is we basically want it to kind of scale into screen from the middle of the screen, and then we want it to rotate back and then rotate off the screen. So here's exactly how we're going to do that. We're going to select this triangle. Okay, let's quickly, first of all, orient it properly. So we're going to go down to the, let's go down to the transform function. Let's go ahead and rotate it so that it's proper and our anchor point's not in the center. So we're going to click on A and bring that over to the center, which should be pretty good, like so. Awesome. Okay. Now we're going to select this and we're going to click on R. R is for rotation. We're going to start by, first of all, scaling it in. Let's create our scale in animation. So keyframe the scale. The scale is currently at 100. I want it to end at 100. So I'm going to move this. Let's see. I'm going to move this over to the 6-second mark. So I have a keyframe for the scale at 100 at the 6-second mark. And I start with a keyframe at 0. So we go from 0 to 100. Select both. Let's head into the, let's do this with the value graph. F9. And then let's just start quick and then slow down with a little bump to the top like this. So boom. We have just a nice and simple animation like so. Boom. Now once it moves in, we're going to want to do the rotation. So here's how we're going to do the rotation. We're going to keyframe the current rotation at what it is. Okay, currently it's +2. We set it to 0 degrees. You know, it's a bit off, so let's go ahead. Leave it at +3. So we keyframe the current rotation at +3. Then we move forward, and all that we want is to increase that rotation. So I'm going to move 2 seconds forward, and I'm just going to have it rotate like this. Let's do 360. So it's going to do one complete rotation like so. Now the problem with this is it's a robotic rotation. So for that reason, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be selecting it, bringing it into our value graph. And we're going to go ahead and select it. And here's what we want. We want it to slingshot back. So we want the value to go above the line and then drop down really quickly. Okay, so how do we do this? F9 to get started. Let's select it. Let's go up to the top so it slingshots like that. And then we're going to move this back so that the movement is pretty quick. Like that. Slingshot and then move back. Let's make the slingshot way bigger. Check this out. Slingshot, boom. There we go. Now we're talking. Now I'm going to do something pretty cool. Okay. Now check this out. I'm going to go back. So now this is nice and simple. We've done this stuff before, right? Now I'm going to keyframe my position. Okay. And now I'm going to click on you. Now I can see all of my keyframes together. I can see my scale in, and I can see where my rotation starts and where it ends. If I keyframe my position here, and I move to my end rotation, and I have it move off the screen to the left side, here's what we get. As the rotation happens, it moves off to the left. Instead, if I want to slingshot it, so that as this slingshot happens, then the rotation moves off to the left, I'm going to select both rotation and position and move them into our speed graph. Let's make sure to right click our position and separate the dimensions. That's first of all, okay? Then let's use the X position since that's what we're going to be changing most of the time. All right, now we're going to select both X position, holding down control and rotation so we can see both of them. Now, if I select my X position and I click on F9 and select the bottom one and click on F9, and I notice over here, we've got the spin backwards and then it spins forwards. There's a few things that we could do that can really, really help this. The first thing we're going to do is go to the moment where it's, spins back like this, and we're going to lift this up so that this thing also moves back. So we're going to have it start with a spike. And then we're going to go to the moment where it starts moving to the left, and we're going to bring this back so that this thing also starts moving to the left like so. So we're going to have it move back as it rotates backwards like that. So we're going to have it, spike up and then spike back down like so. And that is what we end up with. Okay. Once again, I'm going to quickly do that one more time for those of you guys who struggle to understand that. All we have to do is first of all study the movement of the rotation. So if we first focus a bit more on the rotation over here, what's happening is we are basically rotating from a value to another, okay? But the difference is, I'm just going to select only the rotation so you guys can see what's happening. From one value to another. But the difference is we're first bumping up, so we're rotating back, and then we're moving the rotation forward. And that's the same thing that we want to do with the X position. Instead of going from one value to another, we want it to go up so it goes behind the X position and then slingshots off. So that's exactly what we're going to be doing. We're going to select both F9 and then we're going to just make a quick bump in the top here and just have it move pretty quickly in the middle. Now the only difference is I'm going to hold down control and also select the rotation so that I can match it. This way this bump happens at the same time that our rotation bumps. So this thing moves back and a bit more. So moves further back and then slingshots as soon as our rotation moves forward, like this. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to extend this one forward, like so. So we got boom and then boom, like that. And that is what we end up with. Okay? Now it's a bit actually off. I'm going to move this back and move this thing up. Bam. There we go. That's much better. So you guys can notice the beginning of the downward spike happens at the same time with this motion. And there we go, guys. That covers everything you guys need to know about motions and movement animations in After Effects. And let's actually do one more thing. For this last one, you guys notice it's a bit more robotic because this starts and then there's a pause and then it starts. So we're actually going to overlap all of these together like that, just so that the scale in happens and it just does the whole rotation thing. Check this out. Yeah. There we go. So by this point, you guys are pretty much expert level animators. This is pretty difficult stuff, okay? Now we're going to take this a step further and we're going to start incorporating something we call realism. So what you guys just learned in this episode is stacking animations, okay? And I would very highly suggest if you feel like you're still weak, go through this episode one more time. Like, go back from the beginning and go through it one more time. I highly recommend it, because if you still feel weak in animations, it's better to be very, very confident than feel somewhat like something's off. So that being said, that covers it for this specific episode. Now in the next episode, we're going to dive into some cool, smooth velocity animations. I'll teach you guys how to incorporate velocity inside of your animations. And that being said, thanks a lot for watching. I'll see you guys in the next course.